Thank you for downloading Season 5, Episode 2 of Baseball Pitching the Fix. I'm your host, Joe Janish, and with me, as always, is baseball pitching motion expert Angel Borrelli, who's been working exclusively with pitchers from the little leagues to the big leagues since 1995. Angel, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm fantastic. It's just a wonderful April here and on the East Coast. We're getting close to the end of winter. I expect to see spring in probably late June as we freeze in these 35-degree temperatures here. But it's all good.
I don't want to tell you what it's like today here in California.
I don't want to hear it.
The sunny place.
Yeah, I do not want to hear it.
Okay.
So anyway, in episode 2 of season 5, we have a few different things we're going to be talking about. In our teaching moment, we're going to start out with the 4 critical adjustments for power pitchers. And that's going to be a very important topic. So we're going to be running into that right away. And then after that, we are going to be doing some trending topics where we actually talk about the split-fingered fastball a little bit. And then our new segment is titled The Ninth Inning, and we're going to talk more about that when we get there. And I think we should just get right into the meat and potatoes today, huh, Angel? Just get right into our 4 critical adjustments.
I think so. So the reason why I wanted to do this topic of 4 critical adjustments, especially for power pitchers, is based on a lot of the questions and emails that I got from the last episode with Joe Demers. He is such a great guy, gave such a great interview, and I got great response from it. And one of the questions that comes up when I'm ever discussing Joe is, of course, everyone is always, amazed that he's never had an injury and they think it's magic. And then they also talk about, do I ever really have to change his mechanics? Because as you know, I monitor his mechanics all the time. Since his sophomore year in college, I started doing that. And this way we stay on top of things. So the same reason why he's never had an injury is also associated with the reason for monitoring his mechanics. Not having an injury comes from when he gets sore, he gets on top of it right away. But when the connection to mechanics is if he gets out of whack, which he does, like any power pitcher does particularly, we get on top of it right away. So I think the key for a pitcher to remain uninjured and to continue to have good performance is to stay on top of what he's doing and the way that he does it, and always doing a preventative thing before anything gets out of hand. Now, the analogy I like to use in terms of the mechanics is the same thing you would do, when you buy a new car, you get this, like, at this number of miles, you should do this. And at this number of miles, you should do this. And those are because there are specific things that they know happens when your car has so many miles on it. And so you bring it in for what would be called sort of a tune-up kind of thing. Now, if you're a race car driver and you're driving your car in a completely different way, that tune-up might have to happen after every performance. With a power pitcher, you have to stay on top of making sure they're tuned up, because anytime you are working in a powerful way, which is driven by the brain, your muscles, which are taking their messages from the brain, can very easily, for different reasons, start to do things a little bit differently. Your timing can change, different parts can change. So it's very important to monitor the mechanics of a power pitcher. It's not enough to just look at, is he throwing strikes? It's not enough to just look at his velocity. It's very important to have the component of asking the pitcher, how did you feel? And then the second thing is to just take a look-see, to see, does he look the same, and ask him if he feels the same. And for me, because I do film analysis, I'm able to really look at things and then not only look at them, but match them to what the pitcher's telling me. So this is how I work with Joe. How do you feel? He'll say something felt out of whack. He still had a good performance, but Angel, something didn't feel right. It's my job to figure out what it is, to get back to him right away, to make sure he has that information by the next time he plays catch, because playing catch is where he can start to cement and just retime whatever's happening, and then he gets back on the mound. So that's sort of a thing that I think is important for pitchers to start to add to their repertoire of how they train and how they take care of themselves. The other thing I think that came from last week's interview that I think people heard is Joe's not afraid to take a look to see where can he improve. He's not afraid to say, am I doing something I could do better? And even when he's doing great, he wants to still continue to do better. And I think you heard that from him last week. So from all the response I got, I said, I want to talk about the kinds of things I've adjusted with Joe, but also, in fact, he mentioned one of them, the glove arm, which is a constant adjustment to a power pitcher. But just to talk about, this is true for all power pitchers. And the reason why I'm saying power pitchers is because they're not very careful. The finesse pitcher is more of a careful pitcher. So yes, these same things can go wrong with them. But the reason why I'm addressing this as for power pitchers is because this is something that you can pretty much count on to get out of whack, particularly after they've had one of their best outings or they're really on fire. You just want to make sure that you get that car tuned up again, get that engine, readjust everything so that the next time they return and they can continue their performances, because we all know that having one great outing for a pitcher is not enough. They have to be able to consistently reproduce their mechanics. So I want to start with the first adjustment, which I kind of alluded to, is the first thing that goes out of whack with a power pitcher is his timing. And the timing of the upper body to the lower body is critical. And the reason why pitchers get out of whack with their timing is because, one, we know that as they get more tired, they start to speed something up while something else slows down. And science usually says that they're going to speed up their legs and slow down their arm. This is not always true for every pitcher, but they will start to have differences in timing. And most of the time, when a pitcher says, I don't feel right, it's his timing. So, for example, Joe said that to me a week ago. Something doesn't feel right. I assumed it was his timing. I gave him a drill to do when he played catch that regardless if it was his timing, it would start to reset him. And when he got done playing catch, he texted me and he said that was exactly what I needed. So sometimes it's no more of a big deal than the timing. That the timing of the upper and lower body is off. And this is something, I always tell you coaches, you've got great eyes, especially if somebody cues them up for you. So whenever you have a pitcher, one of your starters or your power guys, he says, I don't feel right, or something just isn't right with the way he's performing, make sure he hasn't gotten out of whack with his upper and lower body. Now, the second thing I want to talk about, which has to do with timing, and it goes along with timing, is the glove arm. So as you remember, Joe in the last episode mentioned that that's been one of his things he has to constantly stay on top of. Now, the glove arm to me is one of the most important pieces of having an efficient pitching motion. It's also one of the things that causes most of the problems. Next to the knee lift, the glove arm is the biggest culprit. Joe, is that not like crazy when you think of that pitching is all about throwing the ball hard and locating, and something that seems as innocent as the glove arm or the knee lift could be the most dangerous thing to a pitcher's motion? Is that as weird to you as it is to me?
You know what? It does seem weird on its face, but in my years of coaching and doing a little bit of pitching, I remember somebody at some point saying, wherever your glove goes is where the ball is going to go. I don't remember where that came from, but I do remember that being a profound statement at the time. And I think I just had it in my head all this time. It's like, wherever you go with the glove, that's where the rest of you is going to go. So
yes, that was some genius coach. And I always say coaches are geniuses. They don't know half the time why they're saying what they're saying, but they know exactly what they're saying. And sometimes we forget about these simple things. I always tell the pitchers, the glove arm is called a direction arm in baseball fastball for a reason. That's number one. Number two, you have to remember the vulnerability of a glove arm to an adult pitcher. I want everyone to picture this. Picture the youngest little pitcher you've ever seen. He might be your son who's 6, he might be 8, he might be 10. Picture the huge glove on his hand. I don't care what size glove he's wearing, and it's hysterical when you see the 10-year-olds with a $500 glove and it's bigger than their head. And and you have to remember that arm is moving upwards from their body, and their wrist is not strong enough, nor do they know that the wrist should stay stabilized. Instead, you get the wrist leading up towards the sky as if your fingers are facing downward. And thus is the beginning of what I call funky glove arm action. So you've got a little kid who does something weird with his wrist, with his big glove. And when the wrist does something unusual, the elbow follows. And once you get the wrist and elbow doing something crazy, the shoulder will follow. So we see actions with the glove arm that we don't do in life anywhere. I mean, if you take a pitcher's glove off and ask him to go ahead and pitch without his glove on, you will, first of all, probably see a cleaner action. But secondly, you might see his hand going into, I call it like Frankenstein hand, like you'll have the hands will be all contracted and it'll look funny. And it's a chance to see what he's really doing, or just really look, get up on the mound and really look. So from a young age, we've got the pitchers embedding into their nervous system this unusual movement with the glove arm that we do, that we never use our arm that way in life. And some guys have really funky glove arms. They learn to pitch that way. And remember, you can be funky, but if you practice it enough, you're going to be able to do the funkiness well. And that explains why you say, why is this pitcher so good and he's so funky? Well, guess what? He practiced doing it that way. That's why I say practice doing it right, and you can be even better. So we've got this vulnerability of the glove arm. The other thing is it is on the lead side. And because it has unusual motions, and because it tends to get into funky shapes, it tends to want to go faster. And when you look at most pitchers, the way their glove arm travels to their shoulder height usually has a different path than the way the pitching arm does. And of course, as a sports scientist, when I'm teaching movement, I have to teach a textbook. I don't have the license that you guys have, who are ex-baseball pitchers, your coaches. You've maybe done it a different way. It's okay for you to do it that way. I don't have that kind of license. As a sports scientist, I wouldn't be worth anything if I didn't stick to teaching joint actions the way they come across in science, the way they're described. So when I teach it, I teach both arms going up to shoulder height at the same time, even though once they reach there, they both have a slightly different shape. When a pitcher, if you watch him, his glove arm is going to usually do something different than the pitching arm, and it's usually something that gets him to the shoulder sooner. So there you have the beginning of a timing issue. When the glove arm becomes the dominant arm, in other words, you've got all these body parts moving, and one body part moves out ahead, the other body parts have to try to make up the time, and they may stay with the glove arm timing, which leaves the pitching arm behind, or they will be doing something else to accommodate for what the glove arm has done. So one of the most important concepts that I like to teach when I'm working with someone who's got a quote unquote timing issue, and these are the main two issues that occur to great pitchers. You know, my job is to return pitchers to play after injury and to find that one thing that's a performance problem for them. So I work with a lot of good pitchers. They're not pitchers who don't know how to pitch. They're pitchers who need to be better, or they need to return to play and not get hurt. These two issues, the timing, and usually the glove is the culprit for the timing problem, are the most common. I would say 97% of the time it's what I'm working with. So if you see this happening, the way you want to look at it is the glove arm has taken over the action of the pitching motion. The glove arm should be secondary. The pitching arm should be the primary thing. Everything should be adjusting itself so the pitching arm has the time to come up, get into that perfect angle we want when the front foot lands, that it gets into its perfect position as he turns to face the hitter, and then in the perfect position so he can accelerate. If you are rushing the pitching arm, or you are slow, or it's trying to keep up, or you're not giving it time, which is what the glove arm can do, then you've got the main player being behind. So now you've got to change the way the pitcher works with his two arms. And my favorite way to do that, guys, is to take away the glove arm. I literally have them take the glove off. I have them put their arm behind their back. If they can just keep it at the side and not do anything with it, that's fine. But no glove on, take away their arm and let them feel the timing of their motion with just the pitching arm. Have them go through the full motion. I mean, take their signs, come set, lift their knee, and now the ball's up by the sternum, of course, and you can see the ball. And they come out and they do their motion, and it takes them a minute. They all laugh. They think it's so funny. But you will start to see something that looks very synchronized. And then you tell them, now let's add the glove arm in, but it can't take control. It has to fold in with the timing you just established. And of course, there's many other drills that I give so the glove arm kind of can stay calm. But from there, you can start to see where you need to work. Is that not like a cool thing to do, Joe? What do you think?
That's very cool. Growing up in the Northeast, we didn't have issues with the glove and the timing because we threw a lot of snowballs, so we didn't have a glove on when we were doing that. But in all seriousness, though, you said something earlier about how the little kids have the huge gloves on their hand. I never even considered the fact that if the glove is too heavy for the little kid's hand, that it could throw everything off. And I could see like how this could start at a very young age and just keep going right through adulthood, because that's, how they learn to do things. And it's very interesting to me. And I think, that if you're a coach of a younger kid, under the age of 12 or 13, make sure that he has a glove that is,
Right.
not too big. And, the other thing too, I'm thinking about with the glove in this is so many pitching coaches are obsessed with hiding the baseball. And I think that if we have the glove in the right position, it's naturally going to hide the ball, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, one of the things one of the problems with the glove arm, not just timing, is that because it gets up to the shoulder faster, sometimes it will cause the body to tilt backwards. So you have the glove arm up high in the front and the pitching arm down low, which promotes sort of cartwheeling your pitching motion.
Right.
But
Right.
when the arm is up that high, and the backside drops down low, a lot of times the arm will be straight down by the right knee, let's say a right-handed pitcher, and he might have that arm behind him. So now he's telegraphing that pitch from behind him. Deception is important, and the most important way to deceive and to not see the ball is to, if you picture yourself facing sideways to the hitter, and let's say you're standing behind the catcher and you're seeing a pitcher, he's in a stretch position, he's got the ball in the glove, making sure that glove is close to the body. The best way for him not to see that ball is when the hands come down and the arms raise up. They should be right next to the body, where the body is blocking the position of the ball. Anytime you get tilting or twisting, you're going to probably have that pitching shoulder. Put the ball into a position where it can be seen. So there's many ways for deception, but yes, the glove is a critical thing, the size of it, how fast it moves. If you don't give a glove arm time to go too high, if you don't let it race, then it usually will stop at shoulder height. The other thing I always say is the best way to pitch is to have both arms doing the same thing at the same time. Number one, it's an innate rhythm that the body has. I mean, if you don't believe that, just go do a jumping jack. Some of you might not have done one for 40 years. I guarantee your jumping jack's going to be perfect. That's an innate timing. And if you think about pitching, and I've said this a million times, in fact, I have drills that we call the guys have named it the jumping jack drill, where the arms come straight up to the side. In fact, that's a great way to teach timing. You have both arms down at the side straight. He's standing there like he's going to do a slide step. He's coming from the stretch, let's say, and he's just standing there straight. And he steps out with his left leg, and both arms go up. So you've got a jumping jack. It's actually called a half jack when you don't go up over your head. And of course, the back leg is staying straight. So the back leg isn't participating. But when he lands, he's going to look like he just did a half jack. You have them throw like that. So you're taking away the movement of the glove from the sternum to the navel. And then you're just cementing and using the innate rhythm that the body has. You see, for me, the way I teach movement is I teach it based on what I know is already in the pitcher. I don't have to create much because the body's amazing. We know how to do a jumping jack. We didn't, and even when you learn, I guarantee you, if you teach your 5-year-old kid how to do one, he's only going to do a few incorrectly. He'll get it real easily because it's an innate rhythm in the nervous system. So when you start to do things like that, you get this good timing. Now, the last thing I want to say before I go on is, so if you want to look at little kids, the position that is incorrect because the glove is a problem, when we look at, so picture your gloves on your left hand. Well, picture your left wrist the way that you would bend the wrist when you're looking at the time. Whenever we look at the time, we tend to have the wrist be up and the fingers down. Is that correct, Joe? Does that make sense? You
Yes.
look at the time. That's what the kid's glove will look like. But that glove weighs X number of pounds, and he's trying to lift his arm. Just put your hand in that position and try to lift your arm up and try to do different things with it. Look how weird it is. I mean, it's weird. And then you consider that they're developing that at an early age. And then by the time they're, 16, they've been doing it, a long time. So working with that wrist position is the beginning of trying to get a better glove. But try to have the arms look as normal as possible. I always say get rid of the funky glove arm and you'll get rid of the funkiness. So the timing, big deal. Both arms, the body, the upper and the lower. And then, of course, both arms being timed together, especially looking at that if you see a glove arm that looks like it's leading the race, controlling everything and going high over the pitcher's head particularly. The third thing that I say that I finish the most, and this is actually next to the glove arm, it's the thing that I'm always telling Joe. In fact, when he was in high school and I would be sometimes watching him, I would be wishing so much I had a little speaker in his ear so I could say, finish your pitch, finish your pitch. The power pitchers, and actually this is an interesting thing about pitchers that need more velocity. For some reason, pitchers think that the end of the pitch is when the ball is released. The end of the pitch is, the pitch has an acceleration path that continues on into the deceleration path. And the deceleration path, the end of that is when the arm actually has wrapped around the body. Let's say a right-handed pitcher, he's wrapping that arm around, his right elbow is bent. And then you'll see his arm fall down and his body raise up and stand up. The end of the motion is actually that wrapping part, which then leads you into actually recovering into a normal position. A lot of times that is not taught. We're taught to, you go forward and release the ball and your arm might come down. And so what you get is a deceleration that's halfway. You go through the ball and then your arm stops before it begins to wrap. It might stop right in front of your left leg if you're a right-handed pitcher. You might actually see the arm be totally straight right in front of that leg, but it never gets to the side of the body. And so finishing the pitch is number one for health incredibly important for the health of the elbow because your rear shoulder is decelerating the elbow, and the elbow is decelerating, and the bot trunk is decelerating, and you want to allow it to do that. So if you don't have proper deceleration through the elbow, you end up getting elbow injuries. You get forearm injuries. You also get forearm fatigue because you're not finishing the pitch correctly. And we know forearm fatigue is the number one enemy. So you get all kinds of health problems. But the thing about performance is, and this is what I always say, and all you have to do is say this to a power pitcher. If you didn't finish your pitch, it must be that you didn't accelerate enough to get all the way through the full path. In other words, you didn't make it to the destination. So go through the ball, accelerate thoroughly through the ball, and let your arm respond to that acceleration by properly decelerating through the entire path. Well, when you tell a power pitcher that, actually any pitcher, they light up. And the truth is when the way the body works, which is task oriented, if it knows that the path of the ball starts from max external rotation and then you're accelerating, releasing, moving diagonally, wrapping the arm, that whole task is bigger and the body is firing the appropriate things to get you through that entire pathway. If you think it's shorter, it's firing what it needs to do that. So, what I saw, and this is all anecdotal, but also coupled with some knowledge about the way the brain works and movement occurs, when you tell a pitcher to finish his pitch, you will notice he goes through the ball differently. You'll hear a different pop in the glove when it's caught. The ball is usually heavier, and you will actually see great results in acceleration. So a pitcher needs to go through the shoulder appropriately, to accelerate appropriately, to go through the ball appropriately so he can finish his pitch. And that correction has to be given to pitchers all the time. When they get out on the field and you watch them play catch, the first thing you should be looking at is, are they finishing their throw? Because that sets the tone for the whole day. And most of the time, even your position players, they're out talking, they're doing this. And so the throws look sloppy. And I call it slapping the ball because it doesn't look to me like they've gone through the ball. And when you correct it when they're warming up, they'll take that to the mound. So that should be one of the first things you look at. I always look at the finish of a throw on any pitcher or anybody who's playing catch. It happens to be the way that I learned or the way I decided to start looking at the motion. It's what drew my eye because what you see happen at the end tells you what happened in the middle.
Wow. At the major league level, you see so many pitchers not properly finishing their pitch. It's rampant. And I'm assuming that has something to do with all the Tommy John surgeries, right?
Absolutely, because if the arm's staying straight, which if you're not finishing it, you're still, see the zone of the arm, the way the arm's traveling is, remember, it's bent when you're facing before you accelerate. You're in max external rotation. Then it straightens out. It stays straight a little bit after that as you start to come into the diagonal. And then as it starts to wrap, it's bending. You know, the bicep is decelerating. It's drawing the forearm up. The forearm's got a little rotation to it. All kinds of things are happening. If you stop in the middle of the path, usually they stop in the zone where the arm is still straight. So what's happening is the actual forces that are trying to bend the arm aren't allowed to. And so now you're producing forces in a direction, or let's say you're not releasing forces. And so you end up with more forearm fatigue and you end up with possible tricep problems. Any pitcher who has a problem in the back of his elbow, that is always a deceleration issue. I can't tell you, coaches, how this one thing can change everything. It can change everything. So yes, that I do see it a lot. Now, why do we see it a lot? Because it's one of the things that gets out of whack. It doesn't mean he's not good. It doesn't mean you're going to quote unquote change something. And I'm afraid to change it because I might lose my job if he doesn't improve with it. No, it's one of the things he knows. In fact, my pitchers would say to me, I'm not finishing. And I go, no. And then they go, how about that time? And I'll go, not quite. And then I force them, I give them some cue or we come up with some drill. And they go, oh my gosh, you know what? I've never finished. And I go, yes, you did. You used to finish. And so they don't know they're doing it. So you're doing a pitcher a favor. You're bringing that car in for that tune-up that we know it needs because it's being used. So don't be afraid of take a look at this adjustment. That's why it's on this list. All these adjustments are the simple things. Don't be afraid, coaches, to help your pitchers improve. And the guy who's doing the best, he needs the tune up the soonest.
Right.
Okay. Now, the last adjustment I want to talk about, and I don't know if adjustment's the right thing to say, but I want all the coaches out there to rethink and to make sure you're justifying having a right-handed pitcher go from the left side of the rubber or a left-handed pitcher go from the right side of the rubber. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because I see this a lot. You especially see it in the major leagues. And so of course, once again, studying baseball pitching from a scientific viewpoint, I had to read and do research. All the things that I even look at are because they're either science-based, mechanically based, engineer-based, physics, whatever. And then, of course, I went out and checked it out and talked to pitchers about it. So I've accumulated knowledge and also information. And some of the best pitching coaches I would listen to talk about this issue. And really good old school pitching coaches, in their hearts, they know that this is the best thing to do because it's called mechanical advantage. Every pitcher wants to pitch from the outside. His hand, if you're standing behind the rubber looking at the pitcher, you want to see the arm to the side coming in at an angle to the plate. And on the left arm pitcher, of course, he'd be his arm at the left side coming angled into the plate. Angles are what pitching's about. Not only so the hitter can't pick it up as fast, but because, pitchers want to do fancy things around the plate and they want to paint the corners. They want to go up and down, side to side. So having this ball come out from that angle allows them to do that. Plus, it's very solid for having the wrist be behind the ball. Whenever a pitcher is on the other side, his body's moving straight down the hill. But the right-handed pitcher on the left side, his ball is going to go down the middle of the plate much easier. And if he's a really good pitcher, he kind of intuitively knows that. And don't ask me why he'd be on the left side, but he got there for a reason or maybe didn't think about it. He's going to intuitively still try to create that angle. So you're going to have a right-handed pitcher stepping way over to his right when he's on the left side of the rubber. His left foot will be way over to the right. He'll still be trying to create that angle, and he'll have all kinds of messy things going on with his rotation, his hips, etc. Because pitchers don't just stop giving up wanting to have the ball come from the outside going inward. And when I say outside, I mean they want their release point out and the ball traveling inward at an angle to the hitter. So that's called mechanical advantage. There's lots of ways you can see this displayed. If anybody needs this, I have a little drawing on my phone I send people. I draw lines and let them see it. So, because people ask about it all the time. So when I see a pitcher that's doing that, I always ask why. Now, the reason why coaches make the change, and this will always be the answer, well, my slider wasn't moving this way, or I was having trouble, I was missing. So we've got the Band-Aid approach. If a pitcher isn't locating something, don't go around it and move him. Try to go through it and fix it. That's my thing with mechanics completely. Because you give up too many other things. So I'm not saying that this is 100% always the best way to go, but I want every coach to notice where his pitchers are standing. And youth coaches, No young kid should be making a decision to be on the wrong side of the rubber when he's 10 years old. Teach him the right way. It's like teaching good grammar, it's like teaching the alphabet. And then later on, if some great coach gets his hands on him and there's some reason and this coach has thought it through, trust the coach. But at the beginning, let's everybody do everything the right way, because then you're going to have less pitchers trying to tweak their bodies and try to create that angle. And I can tell you that when pitchers are having problems, this especially the problem if you sit behind the plate, and let's say you're seeing a right-handed pitcher and he's getting hit. He's a good pitcher, but he's getting hit. And you see that when he gets hit, it's because his four seam is coming right down the middle of the plate. And then his pattern of misses is away, up and away to a righty. And it's not just a little miss, it's a big one. When you see that, and that pitcher is standing on the left side of the rubber, that is the main indication that he might be standing in the wrong place. The real estate on the mound is different for him, so he can't do what he wants to do with his body to get the release point where he wants it, to have the ball come in at the angles he wants it. So when you see a good pitcher and you're sitting behind the plate and you see that, that's the first thing you want to check. And that happened to me a few weeks ago. I was sitting behind a plate. I saw that. I went back to old film. I saw that this pitcher always pitched from the correct side of the rubber, reminded him of that, showed him some ball trajectories from the film. He right away said, "Oh my God." He went back and he fixed it. And 2 days later, he threw a perfect game. So there you have it.
Well, there you go.
And of course, I got a ha-ha text after that. There's way more that goes into throwing a perfect game than making a small change like that. But every pitcher needs to understand, if he's missing or he's going down the middle of the plate, he needs to have something that he thinks is going to remedy that. And just that in itself creates a great mindset. So there you have it on the rubber. So coaches, I know you know way more about this than I do, but I want you to take that information. I want to remind you to look at these simple things that sometimes we overlook, just like the pitchers overlook it, because they're just used to driving around, speeding around, and they're never stopping in for that tune-up.
Okay, Angel, just to clarify, because with left and right in baseball, it could be very confusing when you're listening and not seeing. So
Okay.
a right-handed pitcher should be on the first base side of the rubber or the third base side of the rubber?
The right-handed pitcher should be on his arm side. His pitching arms, you should be on the pitching arm side of the rubber.
Okay, so right-handed.
So the right-handed's on the third base. You know why I never say baselines? Because, I don't work in the middle of a field. I work in a bullpen.
Right.
Do you know I could count on one hand when I've been on a pitching mound? I walk out there all the time trying to learn the orientation, but the way you guys see it real easy, I don't see the bases in my brain. So let me think about it. Yes, the right-handed pitcher, when you're standing behind the rubber looking at the pitcher from the outfield, he should be on the right side of that rubber,
right,
third baseline. Did I say it right?
Yes, and it's interesting that that's the way it should be, because for all the years that I've been in baseball, that's kind of the way most pitching coaches teach you to do it. And again, it goes back to this theory that you're hiding the baseball for an extra 0.2 of a second or something by being on that proper side of the rubber. So I don't know if it actually works out that way, but it's interesting that that actually works out the way it's supposed to, that you're supposed to be on that side anyway. Usually these things don't work out scientifically, but.
Well, I was watching a major league game on television the other day, and I forget what team it was, but the starter started getting hit. He ended up getting pulled in the fourth inning or something. And I just happened to, I've always looked at the body. So I'm just now starting to watch the ball. And I love on TV when they have the little strike zone and you can see, I know you guys that don't need it, don't like that, but I love it because it's really helping me see the ball and the angle. So I'm really starting to become better at that, and I love having that component. So I was watching the way the ball was tracking, and his ball was going right down the middle. He was getting hit, and I looked at him, and he was on the left side of the rubber, and I could actually see the path be straight from his hand. It was like, oh, I wish someone had just said, if this guy only knew. So these are the simple things. And by the way, coaches, I don't have to tell you, especially if you're a pitcher, this isn't the simplest thing for a pitcher. When you say move to the other side, it's not like, oh, okay. Usually they'll love it because they'll see the way the angles are created, but it is weird. They need to practice it. But it's something that's worth visiting.
Yeah. I don't know how the mounds are today, but I know growing up in the Northeast, we had a lot of really bad fields. And I can remember as a pitcher, sometimes I would move around on the rubber just because of the holes that were in front.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's even an issue with some guys at the lower levels on these terrible fields, if they're moving around on the rubber and then their location is completely off. I think that's something that maybe some coaches who are on bad fields just keep that in mind. If just say to the pitcher, hey, did you move? Or keep an eye on them, just like you said.
Absolutely. They'll move over because the little green mound is too narrow, but it's going to change everything. The biggest problem with youth pitchers I see is, one, they're on the wrong side. And when you ask them why, I always ask, did your coach make you do it? Because I don't want to violate anything with the coach. But, so I always ask, why are you on that side of the rubber? I don't know. But the biggest problem I see, in addition to I don't know, and they just are there, is they're in the middle. And I'm like, no, commit to one side or the other. So youth pitchers don't know it. And, you're so busy with so much on your plate when you've got youth players that this can be something that you miss. So for all the youth coaches out there, for any coach out there, just give some thought to this thing, because I think all of you know what I'm talking about, and have this, take one day and say, I want to see where everybody's at. You'll be amazed what you're going to see. And also when you see the inconsistency, 1 minute he's in one place and 1 minute he's in another. That's not good either. So anyway, those are my 4 critical adjustments for power pitchers. And I hope that all you coaches get busy and get out there and take a look at some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we should move into some trending topics. So I was watching TV last week at some point, and Pedro Martinez comes on television, and we all know Pedro was such a fantastic pitcher, and one of his lethal pitches was the split-fingered fastball. And they're talking about different pitches, and he says, split finger fastball it's a great pitch, but the problem is that it's a pitch that causes the most elbow pain out of all the pitches. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I remember thinking back to it was like the late 70s and through the 1980s, the split fingered fastball was like the pitch that everybody threw. Bruce Sutter threw it, Jack Morris threw it, like every other pitcher was throwing it in the 80s. And then all of these pitchers were coming up with arm problems, and they blamed it on the split fingered fastball because they said, well, we didn't see all these split fingered fastballs, and now all of a sudden all these pitchers that throw this pitch are having arm problems. So, I remembered that after Pedro said it, and then I thought, you know what? Is there any science to this? Maybe we should talk to Angel and ask her what she thinks about split fingered fastball and whether or not it's a dangerous pitch for the elbow.
Well, I know that some of you may be surprised to hear this, but I don't think any pitch is dangerous for the elbow. I think if you throw a pitch, you have to understand what the risk factors around it, and then you have to control for that risk factor. So what the pitches you throw should be a menu for what you do during recovery. So the guy who only throws, let's say a little kid who's only throwing a 4-seam and a changeup, and let's say he's throwing a circle change, not a split change, something, normal. he is not going to have to worry about extra issues. The minute he adds something else in, he's going to add in more issues with his arm. And so you don't avoid that. You just add things into the recovery. Now, people may be shocked to hear me say this, but I'm kind of a fanatic about things like food, pitches, etc. When people identify things as being bad, like this is bad, and it's a thing that, first of all, I had to get with that program because what if a guy throws a split finger and he loves it and it's nasty, and you say, "Oh, you shouldn't throw that; it's going to hurt your forearm." Well, first of all, he's not going to stop throwing it. My job is to have solutions. My job is to say, "What is it that you do?" Okay, now this is how we're going to balance it. So, I did a lot of research on the forearm because, of course, I wrote a book on strength training the elbow. And I was doing research. And of course, when you do research, you're researching all kinds of sports and all kinds of things. And you read the most interesting things and you find the most interesting points. And so, one of the things that I learned in my research, and then, of course, it's true, is whenever you position the fingers further apart on the ball, you get a different range of motion in the forearm. And because of that different range of motion, you can get more speed. And the reason why you have this is such a nasty pitch is because of the range of motion it affords the forearm, and the forearm is what's rotating. So you're getting, we'll just say this, you're getting more activity in the forearm. It's why Pedro was mentioning elbow problems. And he's really talking about when guys say elbow, it's really the forearm. It's the part of the arm right below the crease, and it affects the elbow joint. So all the muscles cross the joint. So basically, we're dealing with the limb of the forearm. And so the rotation is different. The position of the fingers is different. It affects the wrist differently. It affects the forearm differently. It's nasty because you get more activity in through the forearm. So the split finger can it cause elbow problems? Yes, but when you have a split finger in your menu of pitches, you have to know that your forearm needs extra attention. Now, any pitcher should be relieving tension in his forearm as he goes on. It's why in my warm-up program, they use a ball to relieve the forearm. They take a four-seam grip, hold the ball out in front, straight arm. They do it at their side with a 90-degree angle, and they're rotating the forearm back and forth with the four-seam grip. And they can do that with the split finger grip as well, because what you want to do is not allow the forearm to work in one direction and get tight. So you have to go through full forearm rotation. So since there's so many things to do for the forearm, and I'm hoping that a lot of the coaches, you have strength coaches, you can consult on this. You can consult so many different areas. And of course, my books and my products have them, is you want to be sure that when you're throwing a split finger, that you are addressing the health of your wrist and forearm maybe a little bit more than someone else is. And the first thing you want to do is pay attention to the tightness that you might be getting from it, and then immediately dissipate that tightness. You cannot get on the mound or play catch the next day with anything that's residually tight from the day before. It'll only get worse. So your job is to dissipate it. And when you have that, or let's say you're learning one, and see, this is the thing about the curveball that can be dangerous. And it's why we kind of want kids to wait till they're a little older, because they can identify stress. When you're learning a pitch, you're going to throw it more than you usually would. So if you're learning it and you notice, wow, my forearm does feel different after I have a session throwing it, that doesn't mean it's bad. That's a warning. Okay, what amount of relief do I have to give it? And it's got to be with rotation exercises for the forearm. It can't just be, I'm going to rest it or I'm going to ice it. The other thing is you have to remember is the forearm needs to be strong, and the forearm has more than one component in it. So it's got rotational forces, but also it's a stabilizer with the palm down. So you have to be doing things just to make the forearm muscles, which are the wrist muscles as well, very strong. So every pitcher should have really strong finger, wrist, and forearm muscles. and the rotation component of the forearm. But in addition to that, they have to maintain their range of motion and dissipate the tension before you start throwing again. So you should have a program that immediately when you're done throwing, you're recovering your forearm so that with the next day rest or whatever you're going to get, you're going to bring back 100%. And that's my story on the forearm. And I wish Pedro had that I had been able to tell him this way back when. Didn't he have about 13 types of pitches?
Oh, he threw every pitch. I think he probably threw a knuckleball.
I love it. If I were a pitcher, guys, I would throw every pitch too. So anyway, and I'm throwing getting ready to throw my last pitch right here. Ha
ha. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. But before we get into that, I just want to make a statement. If you throw a baseball as a pitcher, if you are the parent of someone who throws a baseball, if you are a baseball coach, and you don't have Angel's book on the elbow, please go to gymscience.com right now and get the book. It is probably the single most important book that any pitcher could possibly own. And I think it's really important for people to get it, read it, understand that you can strengthen the elbow, because I hear all the time from the knuckleheads on MLB broadcasts that, the reason there's so many elbow problems and Tommy John surgeries is because you can't strengthen the elbow. You could do shoulder exercises, but you can't strengthen the elbow. Well, that's blatantly false. It's not true. If you get Angel's book, you will understand that you can strengthen the muscles to prevent elbow injuries, and just go and do that. And okay, I'm off the soapbox. And now we can move on.
That was a curveball. I like that you're getting into pitching.
All right, I'm off the soapbox. Let's get to the ninth inning, and you're the closer, Angel. So here we go with our new segment.
Yes, I love this segment because I'm going to get to do whatever I want. And this time I want to read an email that I got from one of our listeners, Scott, who wrote me an email yesterday. And this is what he says. He says, I've been going to a lot of high school games lately, and I've noticed a trend with high school coaches that I don't see anywhere else. He said they'll take their pitcher off the mound and put them in as a catcher. That feels like taking the arm out of the frying pan and into the fire. I couldn't have said that better myself. Catching throws, a catcher throws a lot during the course of the game too. So this feels wrong. He says, your thoughts? Well, Scott, and if everybody who's been listening to me, you're right. It's wrong, and it's dangerous, and it's scary to hear that even at the high school level, they're doing it. We know this is a problem with youth pitchers. So to take the medical end, so Dr. Andrews, which most people trust and respect, when he came out with his list of risk factors that they noticed with, the great increase of Tommy Johns on kids under 14, when they do what's called longitudinal studies. They interview, they find out details. And so 10, 15 years into it, they come up with this list and they go, hey, if you're doing this is what all the kids were doing that had surgeries early. And next to the first one, which is pitching with an arm that was tired, was being a pitcher and a catcher. And when you're a pitcher and a catcher, your arm gets tired. So now you're doing the first one as well. So the first two risk factors have to do with or explain why that thinking and why that option is not a good one for coaches. Now, I understand that coaches probably feel the guy with the best arm is going to be good at both those positions, but it's not okay, and it's not okay for more than one reason. Number one, Scott's alluding to the volume of throwing. Yes, the catcher throws the same or more than a pitcher does. Secondly, the catcher is throwing at a different arm slot than a pitcher is. So now his shoulder is going through all kinds of weird changes. And the way a catcher throws is a very dangerous way for a pitcher to throw. Number three, you've got a factor of when a pitcher stops pitching, he needs to go, his body will start to go or should go right into recovery. When I say recovery, I'm talking about the invisible things that happen, enzyme changes, things that happen to the immune system to start healing. You don't want to interrupt that. That's the magical stuff that goes on inside of our body that helps us heal and feel better. And when you put a pitcher into another position where he can't go through that, like catching, he's not only interrupting, but he's actually causing another situation. And what you're going to end up having is a catcher that gets on the mound the next time as a pitcher, and he's not going to be as good. So it is one of the relationships we don't want to see happen in baseball. So I think that, and where parents can be a guidance on this is number one, I don't think parents, you never hear me say parents should talk to coaches about things because I understand the plight of coaches and I'm a coach. I like to do my own thing. But if you see a coach and something's going on, then it may be worthwhile having a discussion with them, not in the middle of a game and not before a game and not in the middle of practice, but pulling them aside and having a discussion with them about it. But before it even gets that far, parents, guide your child to make a choice as to how he wants to brand himself. Don't give a coach an option for him to be both. We don't want a kid say, oh, I can be a pitcher, a catcher, a shortstop. Now you've got the trifecta of arm problems. You want to start to guide your child into deciding what he wants to play so that not only are you going to prevent this, but help your child be good at what he decides to do. Guess what? If he goes down one path and he comes home a month later and says, I hate being a pitcher, I hate sitting on the bench for 4 days, then there's his decision. He may want to be a position player, but try to guide them into one direction. Have the conversation with the coach. Give your child a chance to be excellent at something, because when you're trying to do two things like pitching and catching, you'll be only halfway good at both things. There's no way you can be excellent at one thing. It's why you don't see pitchers be catchers in the major leagues.
Yeah. When I was a kid, and this was 100 years ago, I was a catcher and a pitcher. And I remember there were definitely occasions where I would come out from behind the plate and go up on the mound or vice versa. And, but that was 100 years ago. We didn't have the science that we have now. We didn't have the longitudinal studies, and I can understand why it happens. It's, you have a team that has like one or two really good athletes, and you want to have that athlete in the most important positions. And the most important positions are pitcher, catcher, shortstop, center field. And, I can understand the temptation, but I agree with you. I think it really has to be up to the kid and the parents to make that decision and say, look, my kid's a pitcher and that's it. Or my kid is a catcher and that's it. And you can't have this back and forth stuff because it absolutely is a major risk for the kid's arms. Again, I understand it, but it's kind of like, I never understand why people still smoke cigarettes when we know that we have all the evidence that it's bad for you. We now know that if you pitch and you catch, it's really bad for you. So just stick to one and that'll be that. So Angel, I think we're done for this episode. I think we had a heck of a lot of information. What do you think?
I think it went great. I'm excited to be back. And the next podcast is going to be great too. Why don't you tell everybody about our special guest?
Well, I believe that our next episode, we will have Bellarmine University head baseball coach Larry Owens making a return to the podcast. So we are very excited to have him again. We had a great episode last year in season 4. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely go back. It was the very last episode of season 4 and one of the most popular podcasts that we've had. So we're going to welcome Larry back on again. And I can't wait because I love talking baseball, Larry.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And he's onto some new, well, he's not onto some new stuff. He's been pondering things and talking to me about it. And I can't wait for him because he's actually, he talks pitching strategy and, the other side of pitching. I do what I do so the pitcher can be available to do all the stuff that Larry's going to say a pitcher should do. You can't be thinking about the locating pitches and pitching strategy if your arm's hurting. If you're tripping over your feet, if something feels off, then you can't be about the business of pitching, which is what Larry's going to talk about. So what I do is so that pitchers can be available for what the real job is during a game, which is pitching. And Larry is so good at talking about that real part of pitching. So I'm excited to have him.
All right. Well, don't give up too much, Angel. We want to make sure people listen to the next episode.
Okay, great. See you next time.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Baseball Pitching the Fix. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend and make sure you subscribe to the show. You can do that on your smartphone. And if you're not sure how to subscribe, you could just get our app. You just go to the App Store. It's available for Android devices as well as for the iPhone. Just go to the App Store and search for Baseball Pitching the Fix and download it. Of course, if you want to learn more about Angel and get that book I was talking about, go to gymscience.com. And we hope that you learned something in this episode. And in the meantime, we wish you safe and effective performance on the pitching mat.